thing that I touched on my article, which I'm surprised nobody else has mentioned before. I look at my netbook experience with Windows XP. Now, I believe Windows XP came out 2001, around that time, and I bought my netbook in 2009. So let's be fair, let's say there's 7 years worth of technology between Windows XP being released and my little netbook. And even so, even with that massive gap, which is a long time in computing, and if you look at the specs, the spec progression over this period of time, you can just see how far we've come since the turn of the millennium. And yet, still, with a 7-year advantage on the software that's been released, it's still struggling. This little netbook, I think, well, it does struggle. It physically does struggle just running XP, which makes me then wonder if you buy yourself a new netbook with today's specs, and it's got Windows 7 on it, what on earth is the performance like on that? Because Windows XP was always seen as the stable, fastest version of Windows you could have, and it was one of the reasons I think why people didn't want to move from Vista or downgraded from Vista back to XP, and people were reluctant to leave XP to go to Windows 7. And I just can't see why after 7 years of technology, this netbook still struggles with something that should be loading in a couple of seconds and operating at the speed of light. You just have to look at gaming software, and if you buy a modern PC and run a game that's 7 years old, I think you're going to get pretty much a full experience with all the graphical settings up and still have some CPU cycles to spare, which was just surprised me. And before anybody thinks that this machine was full of any sort of malicious software or it hadn't been secured, that wasn't the case. This was from first boot when I first got the thing. It did get progressively worse as time went on, but I just was completely shocked. And for me, halfway through, say 2004, 2003, this type of performance to me would seem quite acceptable. And it's only when you sort of use Linux and use a Linux desktop that you sort of turn around and say, well, no, this isn't acceptable. This isn't what people should be experiencing. And unfortunately, it's trying to show the mainstream of what Linux can do and what they're missing out on in terms of computing enjoyment.
I thought for when the whole netbook thing, this was yet another thing that Microsoft missed the trend, just like they missed the internet as well. It's only after the internet took off that they thought, oh, hang on, we need to find a way to add that onto Windows, or we'll be left behind. But netbooks was something that Microsoft just missed as well. I remember they decided to put XP on it, but from what I was aware, they just shoved the default XP on some of these installs to try and thwart Linux, and it was never suited for that. And then I think a little bit later on they got some flack for that, that it was barely functional, and that they made a special, effectively a netbook OEM disk, which had a lot of stuff stripped out. It was still XP, but it had a lot of stuff stripped out. It was just a sort of a stopgap until they had something that would actually work on a netbook. But that is one of the things people just get used to. That's what they think. That's what a PC is they get used to all Microsoft's Windows quirks, and they just assume that, well, if you've got a PC, you need to deal with viruses and all that. They just get used to that. So it is sad. But I've shown people Linux, and I've on a live USB or a live CD, and I've said, look, before we boot in, one of the things that I show them is just how fast it boots, because they're used to XP on the same hardware, and I put the CD or the USB in, and I actually say to them, look, before I press this button, keep in mind this is going to be slower because it's running from the CD. It would be faster if I installed it and it was running on the native hard drive, and then hit the button, and they're just stunned at how noticeably quicker it is, even in slow mode, essentially, in CD mode, live mode. And it's just so much quicker than Windows. And they look at you and say, well, surely it can't be fully loaded. No, yeah, it is. Play with it. And demonstrating, clicking, opening applications, and starting going onto Google and searching for something. Meanwhile, Windows is still not got the background wallpaper yet. And already you're onto Google and searching for stuff. Yeah. So the load time, the boot up time is a very noticeable difference on the same hardware.
Well, just before we go, because we're ignoring Paul Roy here, I'm sure he's got some articles he wants to bring up. But just very quickly, just while we're still on the subject of Linux specifically, just to bring people's attention to a new, well, not new game, but the new version of a game that's just been released, which I've covered again on my site, Zero Ballistics. It's a tank-based first-person shooter. Absolutely incredible. Lot of fun. Very simple to get into and a very small download. I won't reiterate the review that I gave it on my site, but if you want to check it out, the link will be in the show notes, and I'll thoroughly recommend that you do. It requires very low system specs to get a full graphical effects out of it. It's absolutely fantastic. Really, really good title. So if you check out the show notes, you can find the links to that and see some of the screenshots of me in action with my tank battling some other people online. So yeah, check out Zero Ballistics. That's my recommendation for the day. So Roy, over to you. Is there? I hope you've got a few subjects you want to bring up.
I don't have anything too specific, to be honest, but I thought that in the future, I think what we plan to do in a previous show was to focus this show on the issue of trolls that we had recently in the site. So I just wanted to say a few things about. Basically, I prefer not to talk about them or talk to them. I actually put them on ignore for obvious reasons. Once you speak to them, they speak more and they try to make a mess and they try to stir people up and they try to approach people who are friends of mine and try to incite them against me in some way. I think Tim has suggested to me that we could do a show where we basically do address some of the points they raise and actually try to put this to rest, because they repeatedly make the same claims and they then actually do try to use that as a bit of a trophy. You know, if you don't reply to them, they see it as some sort of victory. Which is a bit of an issue. I know Gordon has had them recently. They were trying to contact him. They tried to incite people against one another. They try to divide people. It doesn't exactly work for them, but they still try. I'm just wondering if Gordon can maybe speak about the experience he's had with it.
Yeah, I mean, the only one, without naming them, I made one blog post which was more sort of reaction to how things developed. This is going to sound rather oblique without giving names and stuff. But bottom line is, I was a little bit harsh when I wrote the blog post itself. And one of the usual people who trolls the TechBytes logs looking for excuses decided that out of my entire blog post, but the actual subject of the blog post wasn't about the conversation in IRC. The conversation in IRC, the comments in IRC triggered the blog post, but the post itself wasn't about that. And this guy, he essentially started commenting on my blog. It's the first time he's done that. And the whole thing, I mean, the whole post, he decided to focus on the individual, that part of the conversation that triggered it. And my reply was, oh, it's you. I know who you are. Rather than letting him continue to attack, because I know he attacks this same person on lots of different places, and rather than letting him continue to spread that onto my site, I just said, I know who you are. And then I had a little think about it, and I thought, initially the blog post was a bit harsh. I kind of reacted a bit more emotionally to how things were said rather than anything else. So I said that. I put a little comment in. This is actually, I was a little bit harsh. And again, this same guy came back, and again he tried to stoke it up. And after I didn't respond to that, I think he might have got the point. He's tried to talk to me a few times on Identica as well, a few comments back and forth on Identica. And it's just, I mean, he doesn't get any responses. I know who he is, so he doesn't come to me as a blank slate. He's not able to do that. to come as a blank slate. But yeah, there's a few in Identica who just seem to they just want to, I don't know, it's like the peanut gallery.